chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace.
Good evening, Planet Earth, and welcome to the Good News program. My name is Bill Robinson, and I'm your host for this evening's program, and a very special guest from actually sort of like from Wakefield, Jasmine Grace Marino. Dynamite Kid, I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing your testimony with us, and I'm going to explain to the people what a testimony is. And actually, it's your story, but it's a testimony of Jesus, how He's impacted your life. Okay, so go out there. You're watching this at home. Get Uncle Guido and Sister Rosemary or whatever, and get them in there in the room to hear this one, because this is what Jesus does. He changes. It reveals, really, folks, it reveals the nature of God and how He operates. There's 7.2 billion people on the planet, and He never does it the same. Amazing, but yet He's the same. So, try and wrap your head around that one. But what it does, Jasmine, it creates an expectation in people's hearts for God to be, the goodness of God to be manifested in their lives, And the word testimony, and I'm not a big Hebrew scholar, but it means do it again. So what is proclaimed here, the power with it to people can impact their lives, whatever portion of it is. I mean, I see tremendous peace on you today. Fantastic, And somebody might say, well, I can identify with his story, but I mean, I like some of the juice that she's got. And that's the peace, It's fantastic. And that's really what it is. And, God takes a mess and He turns it into a message.
Amen.
He turns tragedies into triumphs. And the word triumph I really like, Jasmine, because it's a little bit up a notch, like Emerald Live, up a notch. We'll kick it in. Well, see, you got a victory, but a triumph is like, I'm coming out of this day with more than I went in with. So that's the story. So Jasmine, you get you're a revivalist, and you were been delivered, and you're a survivor from sex trafficking, which was, which we go, we don't want to even hear those stories. But I'll tell you what. People need to hear what God's doing today in people's lives. He doesn't, He's not interested in how many initials you got after your last name. He's saying, yeah, that's my kid. She's my daughter. Oh, I'm getting excited. I have to stop preaching here in a minute. But anyways, Jazz, Revere, Saugus, you're up. Tell us about growing up in beautiful downtown Revere.
Yeah, grew up in Revere. Probably till I was around 8 or 9 years old. Grew up in a family with 2 parents in the home. Wasn't coming from severe abuse or physical neglect or anything like that. But growing up with my own dysfunctions and issues in a family, with a mom who struggled a little bit and a dad who worked a lot to provide for the family.
Yeah.
And a brother who was 10 years older than me, who had his own struggles. I had a small, immediate family, but a larger Italian, Catholic, bigger family with lots of cousins and uncles and stuff.
So that was dinner every Sunday.
It was.
Oh, yeah.
We call it gravy, not sauce.
Oh, that's right, too, yeah.
So we would go over my grandmother's house, my father's parents, every Sunday. I'd sleep over their house a lot on the weekend. My grandmother was a faithful believer. She would bring me to church. We'd walk to St. Anthony's or Immaculate Conception in Revere. And my grandfather would start cooking the gravy and the meatballs. He was more of the chef. And I just really loved being over their house. She would, read me bedtime stories, tuck me in. She was a great, great woman. Paid a lot of attention to me. And I think really instilled that I was lovable because she really nurtured that piece of me, where my mom and dad were preoccupied with their own stuff in that sense of really not able to do that for me, that nurture piece, but she was really good to me. And I danced as a child, from probably the age of 2. My mom would take me all the time. I was in dance recitals and really loved to dance and perform and felt creative in that, and yeah, had a good time. Went to Revere Beach. I think my mother used to take me to the beach in a playpen. That's how little I was at
Wow.
Revere Beach. Yeah, always at the beach, always outside. Grew up on a little dead-end street near Revere High. Always outside playing, very,
Yeah.
just free,
Yeah.
riding my bike, have a good time. And around 8 or 9, we moved to Saugus. My dad built a house in Saugus. They bought a piece of land, and he fixes airplanes for a living.
Yeah.
But genius with his hands, a mechanic, can build anything, fix a car, transmission, I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever. Something's broke, you give it to him. He fixes it. And he built this beautiful home in Saugus. We moved in there, and I started attending middle school in Saugus. And I think that's around the time, 11, 12, 13, when life started to get hard for me. I think just growing up, not having anyone really to nurture and to guide and to mentor me,
Oh, yeah.
and having a bunch of questions about life and trying to figure out sexuality and identity and all this. And
And you lost your brother, you told me.
older, later in life.
Okay.
But since he was, I'm 12, he's 22.
Oh, okay.
So it really wasn't much of a connection. He was older, doing his own thing, and he had his own struggles from an early age. And so when he was around 18, he left. He traveled the world, actually, backpacked through Thailand and Fiji, lived in Australia. So he wasn't really around much of that time. He was pretty much gone by then. So again, just like on my own. And when you find out information from the streets, it's usually the wrong information, and I was getting into fights and in relationships with older boys, and started drinking and doing drugs. Anything that was offered to me, I would do. I think I was always searching for love and affection, love and attention, and I'd find that in all the wrong places. I didn't understand that God-shaped hole that people talk about, that we all are created with. We're all created to know God. But we just don't figure it out sometimes till a really long time later.
Yeah.
So that the kind of mission I was on, looking for love and attention. And for me, it just got bad because boys would take advantage of me. I spelled love S-E-X.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you weren't supposed to be doing that stuff. I thought that's how you got them to like you or to continue liking you.
Yeah.
And raped at least twice by the time I was 14.
Yeah.
I don't remember all the details because of the blackouts from the drinking. So again, experiencing that sexual violence as a young age, and not having anyone to process that with or talk to, put me on a real broken path. And it was just filled with shame from a very young age. And I think I'd just gotten even deeper into situations to continue to try to cover up that shame, right? So by the time I'm 15 or so, I decide, let me go to vocational high school. So I actually went to the Voc here in Wakefield. My parents weren't talking about college. They weren't talking about future plans, but I thought, I need to have a job when I graduate. What am I going to do with my life? So, okay, maybe I'll be a hairdresser. So I came here to the Voc and went through high school, did pretty well. I'm not really strong academically, but again, like that whole creativity piece and the hairdressing was my thing. And I graduated with a diploma, 18, 19 years old. I decided I want to go to North Shore Community College in Lynn. I want to be a journalist because I like to write. And I thought I'd move to New York and write for a fashion magazine, something exciting, right? Trying to figure it out. And I'm partying often on the weekends, hanging out with my friends. We used to go to the Palace nightclub over here in Malden, Saugus, off of Route 1. It's not there anymore. And I mean, I had been going to this nightclub probably since 15 years old. They had an under 21 night. And I'd always go there, but of course I was always drinking and just into things I shouldn't have been doing. And at 15, I really shouldn't have been in that kind of scene. But here I am at 19, and I'm still doing the same thing. And then I just met a guy, and it was like a normal night. I didn't know it. We exchanged phone numbers at the bar. He buys me a drink, spends $7 on me, and I'm impressed. Like, it didn't take much. And we get together a few days later in East Boston, and he shows up in his champagne-colored Mercedes-Benz, and he seems to have it all together. He's dressed really nicely, and it's impressive because I was coming from, again, these relationships that were always damaging, and I was always the one giving. I never was in a situation with a guy who, had it together. And we just start to date and start this process, but I had no idea that my life would completely change, soon after meeting him.
So this guy is an actual predator. Tell us about that.
So he ends up coming from his own brokenness, and that's something that I completely understand today in reflection. I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea. He was coming out of his own situation, growing up in the inner city of Boston, was in gangs, street hustler, selling drugs, probably 11, 12 years old, raised by a single mom. Kind of was the breadwinner of the family, so he was out there hustling and selling drugs. And selling women was going to be his next hustle. So he was coming up in this street life, in the game. Mm-hmm. And so you have to realize that a lot of pimps and traffickers are raised in these kind of families. So your father's a trafficker or pimp, so you become one, your uncle, your cousin is, and you learn the game that way because you're born into it. Mm-hmm. For him, it was a next hustle because he was selling drugs, and obviously selling women is a lot more profitable because mm-hmm. you can sell one woman over and over and over again compared to selling a drug and then having to go buy more. And it's a lot less risky, right? You get pulled over on the highway with a trunk full of cocaine, you're going to jail. You get pulled over on the highway with a woman, and it's really hard to tell what's really going on.
Right.
So this was his thing that he was up and coming in, and there was other traffickers who were teaching him the rules and how it all works, and I had no idea that this was happening. And so we begin this dating process, and this is called the grooming process. And this is what traffickers do. So they spot your vulnerability. And so he obviously could spot my vulnerability. I had no self-esteem. I was carrying a boatload of shame. I didn't feel good about myself. I had dreams and goals, like I said, going to school, working at a hair salon, trying to make something out of myself. But he spotted that need in me to be loved and to do anything almost for that love.
Yeah.
And so he preyed upon that. And he would say things like, well, why would you want to go to school for journalism? That's stupid. There's no money in that. Why would you want to work in a hair salon? You can own one. So any dreams and goals I had, he tried to squash or make me believe his way of seeing things. But I'll tell you right now, like, the first thing on my mind growing up was not to become a prostitute or a drug addict. You know, as a little girl, I never dreamt of that would be my life. And I really want to make that clear to a lot of people out there, is that our culture and society believes that prostitutes love this lifestyle and it's their choice and that's what they want to do. Yeah. But that sex should never be considered work. And all the women that I've met in my time of being trafficked and afterwards, no one ever loved what they were doing. And it came with great harm and great risk to their mind, body, and soul. You know, you're bankrupt after you go through something like that. And that's why the majority of domestic American women that are trafficked or forced into the commercial sex trade are hooked on drugs, because they're trying to cope with what they've been through. Yeah. You know, so people don't see that whole story. They just see the end result, which is a woman all messed up on drugs in the sex trade, and they think that she chose that. But I'm here to say it's the vulnerability that puts us in these situations. Yep. Young girls get into the sex trade as young as 12, 13 years old because they're running away from abusive homes. They're running away from abusive foster homes. What's been so freely taken from them as children, they're being sexually abused at home, and then a trafficker comes along and promises, now someone's going to pay you for it. That feels like an upgrade. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it seems so promising to a young 13-year-old that has no family support, and a trafficker comes and promises her the world. And it happens to young boys too. There's so many girls and boys that are running away. They're called throwaways, you know, and no one's looking for them. And the system is way too overloaded to keep track of everybody, so they get scooped up really quickly. They don't get out, so they're 26 years old working in a strip club. Really? Did she make that choice at 12? No, she was a child. Yeah. You know, and so that's my story. But just, you know, 90% of women in the sex trade have been sexually abused as children.
Okay.
So for me, I was that short 10% where I wasn't sexually abused as a young girl, but I did experience sexual violence.
Yeah.
So that's the vulnerability right there, and that's what they pry on. And so that process starts. He's checking me out. He's feeling me out, seeing how I'll go. You know, if he can really get at me. And it just happens to be that I go to a college party, Salem State, college guys, they're all hanging out, drinking, partying. Again, and no shame and no condemnation on any man that has gone to a strip club or watched pornography or purchased sex. I mean, I get it. Sexual brokenness, sexual addiction, it's a reality. I'm not here to condemn, but I'm just saying there's freedom for that too, right? And that there's something that we got to do, especially as the church, to talk about that for men. Because men are the demand, right? If they weren't demanding this, there wouldn't have to be such a supply.
Yeah, if nobody was buying drugs, there wouldn't be any drug dealers.
Right. And so here I go into this college party, all these boys drinking, hanging out, and a girl walks in as the entertainment, and it happens to be my best friend. And I was shocked because I didn't know she had gone into this lifestyle. I knew something was different, that she had a new boyfriend I didn't know much about, but I had no clue that she had become like a dancer or a stripper. And so I cry, she cries, we ruin the party, we get kicked out, right? And I go home, I tell my boyfriend what happened, that she came to the party and he happens to know her trafficker. Whatever the chance of is that, I have no idea. And he says, oh, no, why don't you come see how she's living? You know, she's making a lot of money, I know her man. So he takes me to her house, and she's living in Chestnut Hill. As we know, really nice, affluent area. Range Rover, BMW in the driveway, nice big fence around the house. And that's the thing, like, trafficking happens all day, every day, but it's hidden in plain sight. And so no one's noticing this.
Wow.
It's not like on the street back in the day in the combat zone,
Yeah.
where a woman would be out in Chinatown and you'd
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah.
And the pimps would be there. Like, it's not like that anymore. It's all indoors. And it's happening everywhere. And it's considered sex trafficking. Again, those women that were on the streets, I guarantee they were forced to be there too. That was sex trafficking too. We just didn't have the right lens to look at that back then.
Wow.
And so here's this girl living in this big, beautiful home. We're 19 years old. She has her own room, clothes, shoes, jewelry, all this exciting, fancy stuff. And at 19, like, that's awesome. You know, like, that's what you aspire for. She's telling me she goes to the work at a, you know, massage parlor, a brothel, and she also does these parties, and she makes all this money, and she gives it to her man, and he provides everything that she needs. And the other women living in the house, those are considered her wife-in-laws. So to understand, trafficking has its own language, its own lingo, its own culture. You know, when you get wrapped up in this, it doesn't operate like the rest of the world. And this home is considered the trafficker's stable, you know, where all his women are. And so she had only been down and doing this maybe 6 months or so. So to her, it was still okay. You know, the extreme violence and all that hadn't set in yet. And so she's seeming really happy. On the other hand, my boyfriend's been like dropping these seeds, making me doubt myself. And so finally I say to him, okay, I'll try. But if I don't want to do it, can I stop? And he says, yeah, of course you can. So, okay, he sends me down to Hartford, Connecticut. I'm still living at home with my parents. You know, that no one was really paying attention to me anyways, never mind at 19, you know, so I could disappear for a few days or whatever, and it wasn't a major deal. Go down to Connecticut. I get sent into this massage parlor, had been in business at least 20, 30 years, right in the middle of the community. People walk by all day long for work. And automatically my name gets changed, right? So now I'm Tammy. I'm this other girl. I get sent down there with a duffel bag full of condoms, baby wipes, skimpy dress, high heel stilettos, and I'm like sent into this lounge area, and I have to sit there and wait for the men to come in and pick me. And then you just constantly do this all day over and over again. I worked from 10 a.m. until 1 a.m. for these few days in a row. The first time I'll never forget, you know, completely disgusted, ashamed. The man could have been my grandfather at the time. I mean, he was a regular. He came every week, and he always wanted the newest girl. You know, so this is how it goes. And I was like disgusted. The memories burned in my brain. You know, it was like shame came over me in such an intense way. I just shut off from my body. I unplugged. So if you've never been through anything so severe and traumatic like that, you probably don't get it. But it's like a switch actually goes off in your body, and you disassociate. You just can't deal with it. So I shut off, and but I'm also really excited by the fast amount of money I'm making, right? And so that's the reality. You make $80 in a quick half an hour, compared to $80, maybe $60 in a whole 8-hour shift working at a hair salon. You know, so the reality of fast money is the thing. I do this for these couple of days in a row. My boyfriend comes back, picks me up. We come back home to Boston where he's living. I have a pocket full of money, and we get out of the car, and he puts out his hand. And I knew that meant for me to hand over the money, but all of a sudden I got very confused. Why'd I give you all the money? It's not like we were in, wait, are you my boyfriend? Are you my pimp? I thought you loved me. It's not like I'm on the combat zone and I need your protection. You weren't even there the whole time I was working. You know, I had all these thoughts, and I was really confused. It was straight confusion. And he just says, is there going to be a problem? And I'm like, no. And I just hand over the money. And at that moment, it was like I lost my voice. I lost my courage. Couldn't speak up. I felt so dirty and so ashamed, and I wanted him to love me. I thought you were my boyfriend. How's this all going to work out? You know, but I just didn't have it. And so shortly after that, I began to change my mind and say, I can't do this anymore. I can't look my parents in the eyes. I'm lying to them. I'm like a whole nother person. Who am I? What is going on? How do you love me, but you're making me do this? And I started having real bad conflict about it. And I started voicing that. And that's when he started using violence to keep me quiet. So the first time he put his hands on me, we were coming home from Connecticut. probably 2, 3 in the morning, I'm driving, and I say something he doesn't like. I was constantly known to say something he didn't like. Big Italian, big mouth, I don't know. Well, I was always saying something. And I say something, he backhands me so hard my head hits the window. My vision becomes blurry and I have to pull over because I can't see. And he just proceeds to beat me, pull me out of the car and beat me on the side of the highway. And luckily there was another trafficker and his girl in the back seat who pulled him off of me, and they threw me in the back seat, and I cried all the way home to Boston. And that's when I knew, oh no, what did I get myself into? You know, this just got real. And I knew that it was going to be really hard to get out. And I was under him for 5 years. So the violence increased, the fear. He told me he would kill me or my family if I tried to leave. He would cry after beating me and say he'd changed, that he really loved me. You know, constant manipulation, brainwashing, and fear. And so it's not just that easy for a woman to walk away. You know, sooner or later, I ended up moving into a single-family home with him in Everett, and the isolation and everything just got worse. So that's the thing about trafficking, is that it's a lot like domestic violence, but on steroids, because of the shame that you're using for what, because of what you've been through. Isolation, emotional, physical abuse, financial abuse. I couldn't go food shopping without him giving me the money to go, without telling me I could go. Like, everything was under his control. And I thought moving out from my parents' house would be better because, again, I was being tortured. I couldn't look at them. I couldn't do this. I was afraid he was going to, like, really kill me or my family because there was always a gun on him or present. So I believed that he would do that. And moving into this home just became more isolated and more intense, and being trapped under there. I was then moved to Kittery, Maine to work in a massage parlor. It was, if you ever gone to the Kittery outlets to go shopping, I mean, you drove right by the place.
Okay.
It was right there. Business, again, 20 years. I had to go to massage therapy school in Nashua or Manchester, New Hampshire to get a real massage therapy license, which was paid off, you know. And then you go and you give the lawyer money and a sealed envelope, and he pays off the police chief to keep the place open. So that's how this establishment in particular stayed open. And so that's another reason why women in the commercial sex trade don't have a trust for authority or police, because we know that they're in on it.
Right.
Or they're, you know, buyers. So we really struggle with that. That's why I wasn't going to go call the cops and say, I'm being sex trafficked. No, because I wasn't identifying as that. I would have been arrested for prostitution, and then I probably would have been killed for being a rat, right? So it's not just that easy to walk away.
Yep.
Worked in Maine for about 2 years, realized now upon reflection there was a young girl working there, 14, from the DCF system. She was a runaway, got picked up by a pimp, and was working there for a while, and the place finally got busted. I think somebody was looking for her. And her trafficker and one of his main girls ended up going to prison for a while. So anyways, Maine gets busted, and this is when Craigslist became popular, and he started putting ads of me online. So the internet has completely fueled sex trafficking business because of how anonymous it can be, and how quick a John or Trick sex buyer can go online, look at all the ads, make a call, shoot an email, and before you know it, you're, you know, exchanging money for sex in a hotel, and in your own place of business when it's closed, in your own home when your wife and kids are away. I mean, I visited so many homes, so many places, and like the majority of these men, the sex buyers, you know, are in like their 30s to 60s, average middle age, working class white males with families. I would say that was who the majority was who was purchasing sex. So these sex buyers aren't another population, right? They're men in our communities, men in our workplaces, men in our churches, again, men who struggle with sexual addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And so this gave me a little bit more freedom working in the hotels and all over the place. My trafficker had other women coming in and out of the house at this moment. You know, I was making so much money that I would begin to keep note of it. I wanted to see how much money I was making every time because he'd always promised me retirement. And so one time I used to write down every day what I was looking at. And one time just recently I had gone back and found all these papers and notebooks and journals and everything that I used to keep. And on one piece of paper I added up, I made over $20,000 in 24 days. So he was making a lot of money just off of me. And so he wanted to open up a business to keep it as a front, to run all his money through. And so he sent me to community college. I went to Bunker Hill Community College, and I got an associate's degree in business. So at the same time, again, being trafficked, going to community college, I get my business degree. I don't feel any ounce of pride or accomplishment because I didn't want that degree. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that he couldn't take that degree away from me, so I worked really hard at it. And I was getting stronger because I was realizing I wasn't as stupid as he was saying I was. And I was working out like a maniac. I mean, I had really unhealthy coping skills, but I was like trying to control just my body because I couldn't control anything else. So I was working out like a maniac. I was probably a size 1 or 0, very skinny. Developed eating disorders, had a constant lump in my throat because of the stress that I was under, constant daily basis. I would scrub my body constantly because I felt so dirty. Really developed a lot of OCD, crazy habits because I couldn't control anything. And now at the same time I get the degree, I'm making all this money, I'm working online, I become pregnant. And pregnant with his child. And I thought this baby was going to save my life. I thought for sure I'd be able to stop prostituting and be able to move on with my life. And sadly he forced me to terminate the pregnancy. And so I was horrified. And I was devastated. And I totally didn't want that. I didn't want to go to the clinic. This is not my choice, but I knew if I didn't go, he would have had me lose a child some other way.
Yeah.
But that became my driving force inside of me, and I had to go for good. To take a life was something more I could handle. He used and abused me all these years for these 5 years, but I had to go. And so I started saving money without him noticing. Every night I'd work, I'd put a few $100s in a Ziploc bag. I put elastics around it. I tied up and I put it in the dirt in my potted plants.
Wow.
And I saved money like that for about 6 months.
You know what we're going to do, Jasmine? Because the name of this program is The Good News. And the good news is this: Jesus loves you just the way you are. And he does give people a way out of this kind of stuff. Or whatever stuff they're in. I don't care what it is. You can get caught up in whatever, When we come back, you're going to, as part of your testimony, is how Jesus came into your life and changed it. And generally we would probably have you give it right now, but I think there's a little bit more before we get to that. I just want to give the people an opportunity out there in television land to know this, that he does come. If you ask him, he shows up, man. He like you never can believe. Now you can listen to all the Jasmine stuff here, but there came a time and a point in her life when she said, I'm done. Come in and help. And he takes over. So I want to give the people out there in television land the opportunity to do what you did and I did. Just say, listen, man, there's something here. I don't quite understand it, but we drive a car. We turn the thing. We don't know how the motor goes. What you do is you just say, Lord, you know what? I don't understand all this, but I want some of that peace that Jasmine has today. I want that. And just tell him, I'm sorry for screwing up and making a mess of things. Just come into my life, will you? And he will hook you up with the right people at the right time in the right place. So you'd say, Jesus, take over my life. I want something here. And you know what? He will do it 101 times out of 100. He does it.
He's faithful.
Oh, faithful. He's off the charts faithful. Yeah. So we want to, out there in television land, you'd have that opportunity right now. Do it. Wrap your own words around it. It's not like you got to read it out of a book or something. No, just he's looking at not your head, but your heart. And when he says that, hey, wow. So that's it. So Jasmine, I want to thank you, and I want the people out there to stick around because we get part 2 of this, and it really it's like off the charts dynamite with the love of God just proclaimed in this situation. So until next week out there in television land, God bless you and have a good week.